Hey guys, this is EdRoh, and today we're going to be setting up a super easy Redux Saga application and make a simple API call with that. Now you're going to need a React Redux application setup with Create React App, or you can just watch a previous video of mine if you want to set that up. So what is Redux Saga? So Redux Saga is basically a middleware that allows you to handle a lot of API calls or asynchronous operations in a very clean way of writing it. That's a lot of fancy terms, but basically, you can make API calls and handle all of those type of logic in a Redux Saga. It makes a very easy way of writing it. There's a bit of a boilerplate to it, but once you set that up, you have a very easy way of writing asynchronous operations such as API calls. If you look here, this is the very meat of Redux Saga, and you have all these weird fancy terms or fancy things like this star operator, which means this is a generator function, but don't worry about all the fancy terminology for that. All you have to look at is that every time this action is called, something that has user fetch requested as its type, it's going to call this function, this generator function over here, and it's going to run this lines of code. So what Redux Saga is different is that you have these particular keywords such as the yield keyword. And what this will allow us to do is that it will allow us to call this API function, which we'll just call like an API or something, and it's going to tell it to wait. It's going to tell it to wait for all this information to come back from that API call before proceeding to the next line. That's what yield refers to. It just tells it to wait before you move on to the code. Whereas normal JavaScript, without this type of yield keyword, you would call this API function and then you would proceed to the next line. So this is kind of like another way of writing ES7 async await functions. It's kind of like that, except we're using generator functions and a lot of built-in functions that Redux Saga has that give you the opportunity to customize and give you lots of options of handling sometimes very complex asynchronous operations. And then the next thing you want to see is that there's a lot of other potential effects, is what they call it, that you can use, and that will provide you a lot of like different functionality. But for now, we're just going to worry about call and put. So that's what Redux Saga is. Now let's go into our code. So I've already set up a React Redux application. If you haven't set that up, you can watch my other video setting that up. But for now, I'll show you what I have. So in our index.js, I have the setup for our Redux and reducers. And if you look into our app, we do not have anything in our app. And a reducer just has the first reducer over here. Now the first thing I want to do is go into our terminal and we're going to install Redux Saga. Once that's finished, we're going to go to our index file and we're going to be writing some setup code. We're going to be applying middleware. And then we're going to be importing create Saga middleware from Redux Saga. And we are going to import a function we have not created yet. We will be creating this, but we're going to import my Saga from the Sagas file. And then if we go here, we're going to create our Saga middleware. Create Saga middleware. And we are going to add it to our store over here. Apply middleware. And we're going to pass in the Saga middleware we have created. And we are finally going to run our saga. You know, everyone loves all this boilerplate code. It's just, but realize in a big application, you just have to set this up once and you're good. Anyways, we want to go into our sagas file, which we haven't created. So we're going to create that. We are going to import take every from Redux Saga /effects. So this is one of the effects that I mentioned before. And what we're going to do, we're going to create a generator function, call it mySaga. And we are going to yield take every. And we are going to add get users fetch. We have not created this action yet. And we have not created this function either, get users fetch. But we'll be creating that shortly. So basically, every time this gets called, this action gets called, we're going to run this generator function. And we'll be writing that in a short period of time. mySaga. And this is basically our setup. I'm going to save that. Now that we have Saga set up, we're going to build a very simple application. What we're going to do is we're going to call an API that will be from here, sample user API. We're going to go to this website and we're going to look at this API URL. We're going to be calling this, we're going to grab a list of users, and then we're going to display this list of users. That's all we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is create our actions file. And in this action file, we are going to export an action type called get users fetch. And I will be copying it so I don't make a typo. And this will be used in our action creator over here, get users fetch, that we will be creating. And this will just be type get users fetch, like that. This will trigger our middleware and will also create another action constant, get users success. So this one will be used when we finish the API call. We get that. Then we're going to go to our sagas and we'll be doing a number of things here. We are going to import call and put. So these are effects that will allow us to make an API call, and this one will be to call action. All right, and then we're going to import the constants that we've created from our actions file, get users fetch from our actions. And now it's time to create our generator functions, get work, get users fetch. So to do that, we're going to create a function generator like this, work, get users fetch. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable users, and we are going to yield and call an API function. So we have an API function that we have not created, but this will wait for this API to finish before it goes on to the next line, which is going to yield, and we're going to put type get user success. And we're going to pass in users. So what this will do is going to wait for all the users to be grabbed from that API call we make, and we're going to put it into this action object, which we will work with in the reducer. So function users fetch is going to be the function that is going to call our API function. And what this function, all it's going to do, it's going to call the API that we are going to try to call for. So we're going to go over here, we're going to copy this line of code, and we're going to fetch our users. And then we just got to make sure we take the response and parse it with .json like that. As simple as that. That's how we make an API call. And then if we go here, we are going to have to handle this particular case in our reducer. So I'm going to copy this again. We're going to go to our reducer, and we're going to case get user success. Oh, and we got to make sure to import this guy. Get user success from our actions file, like that. And in this particular case, oh, I think I made a mistake. I want to put it in our switch. All right, so in our get user success, what we're going to do is we're going to return our state that we've already have, and we are going to create a users over here. And this will hold the users. And we also got to make sure in our, this is our initial state over here. In this empty object, we are going to initialize it with an empty array. So basically, when the API returns, we are going to fill this array with the new set of users. Or actually, more technically correct, is going to replace this array with all the users that we've received. Okay, and then now, finally, a lot of boilerplate, but once you get used to it, it's very nice and clean. When you have a lot of actions and reducers and sagas, having all these separate scenarios allow you to handle a lot of these in a very clean way. And then the final thing that we have to do is actually use that in our application. This is just to set up all the actions. We haven't actually called those functions to trigger it. So we're going to go to our app.js folder, and we are going to import our React Redux hooks use dispatch, which will allow us to call actions, and then use selector, which will allow us to grab state from Redux. Like so. And then we're also going to import get users fetch from our actions file that we have created. And we're going to set up our dispatch. This is just something we always have to do. Use dispatch, invoke it, and then we have to grab our users and use selector so we can grab the users list that we've created in our reducer, like so. And once we have all that, we're going to first try and display our users like this, users.map. So basically, I'm just going to display the user did I miss /div users? There's one. Oh yeah, I missed the parentheses. There's 3. And since if you look in our response, there's a user name right here. So we're going to try and grab that value. So user dot name. Got to make sure that's in brackets. So basically all we're doing is grabbing a user's mapping through, or display just the user name. So let's run this. This is not completely finished, but let's make sure that I can see what we have for now. Can't resolve action. Oh, sorry. So it looks like I made a typo over here. Actions like that. Should be good to go. And I made another typo. If you go to app.js, my first reducer like this. And voila, we have it. We have nothing right now because this is an empty array, and that's kind of expected. So the next thing we need to do is actually call our action. So right now there's nothing that's calling our action right now. Nothing calling get users fetch. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a button and pass in an on click. And this on click will dispatch or get users fetch action. And we're just going to call it get users. So now if you look here, we have a button, and then once you click this button, we get the list of users. All that code for this API call. Yeah, there's a lot of boilerplate, but once you have all this set up, all we're going to be doing is creating new generator functions like this that will handle our API calls. Just another action if you need. And so there you have it. So that's Redux Saga in a nutshell. There's some boilerplate code, and I won't lie. There's some boilerplate code and a little bit of learning curve of understanding what these effects are doing, what these generator functions are doing. But if you understand it in the way I explained, where you go and every time this action is being called, we're just running this function. That's as simple as that. And these yield is basically just waiting for the API calls to finish. You can see a lot of the potential for sagas to actually handle your API calls. Like if you're starting to deal with very complex asynchronous logic, for example, when you're making consecutive API calls, I've had to do that before, where you make consecutive API calls. This allows you to write very clean code like this, so you can just make another API call, wait for it, save it into another variable, and you can use that. Whereas Thunk runs into an issue called callback hell. You can read that up, and you'd have to chain these actions in it, or chain these API calls, and it gets kind of messy and hard to manage. But sagas are dedicated for this type of work, very complex asynchronous logic, and it has a lot of these effects that you can use to give you a lot of opportunities, or give you a lot of options to handle complex logic. You can have something like throttle, for example, that can prevent too many actions calling the same API, so you don't have too many API calls. They have a lot of these built-in effects that give you the opportunity to handle your asynchronous logic easily without having to write it yourself. And so there you have it. That's Redux Saga in a nutshell. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, just comment below, and I will see you next time.